The design of the Anjanath went through several changes before settling on the one that we see in Monster Hunter World, but I think it goes without saying that the Anjanath we have now is clearly inspired by the Tyrannosaurus Rex. I don't even need to talk about why, it's just that obvious. So we'll start there. The Tyrannosaurus Rex was a theropod dinosaur that lived during the late Cretaceous period. Not Jurassic! Thanks for nothing, Spielberg. The Cretaceous period took place about 145 to 65 million years ago. Fun fact, the Tyrannosaurus Rex was the last known member of the Tyrannosaurids and the last non-avian dinosaur to exist before the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction. So you could say it was at the apex of everything. Pretty suiting for something with king in its name, right? These monsters were the largest land carnivores of all time, and the largest complete specimen ever discovered, nicknamed Sue, measures in at 12.3 meters, or 40 feet long. That's from the tip of the nose to the end of the tail. A trademark feature of a theropod is the S-shaped curve that's formed at the neck. But unlike other theropods, the muscles in the Tyrannosaurus's neck were a lot shorter to help move its massive head around. In fact, these heads were so large that the tail had to counterbalance the whole thing, otherwise it'd be impossible to move. It'd be like a puppy wearing a football helmet, just dragging its head everywhere it went. Along with its massive head, the T-Rex had some of the largest teeth of any carnivorous dinosaur. Teeth so large that Kevin Padian, a professor of integrative biology at the University of California, referred to them as lethal bananas, coming in at 30.5 centimeters long. That's about the size of your standard ruler and almost as impressive as this guy's hair. Well, I think that about does it for specs on the T-Rex. After all, this is a gaming show, not a dinosaur history show. So let's look at some behaviors. Now, keep in mind that there's really no way of telling how these behemoths behaved, but we can gather clues from fossils, how they're laid out, what's around them, the damage done, scars found on bone, you know, that kind of stuff. As a kid, I was always told that the Tyrannosaurus Rex was a lonely, gigantic predator, running around eating other dinosaurs, being a straight-up prehistoric badass with those serrated banana teeth, but scientists have speculated that they may have been a bit more social than we first thought. According to paleontologist Kurian Tank, these carnivores may have had very complex interrelationships. Tank, a paleopathologist, found interesting patterns of bite marks on other theropods, including T-Rex. These were in the form of gouges and punctures placed on the sides of the snout, on the sides and lower surface of the jaw, and occasionally on the top and back of the skull. This suggests that T-Rex may have hunted together, or at least fed together, since bite marks are indicative of using the sides of their jaws, not the front. This is a lot like how lions or wolves feed. They'll snap at each other, but the strikes are meant as warnings, not because they're actually trying to kill one another. Speaking of feeding, and this brings me to my final point before moving on to the Anjanath, how did the T-Rex eat? Did it hunt? Did it go out and use its itty bitty arms and get itself some McDino's triple stacked meat sandwich deluxe? Did it use the drive-thru? Alright. Tyrannosaurus Rex has always been painted as a predator. This has been the assumption from the very first discovery of T-Rex fossils, but it turns out that they could be what I like to call opportunistic feeders. There's a lot of evidence that supports that the T-Rex hunted its prey. Based on kinesiological data from fossil specimens, it's proposed that it could run between 24 to 37 kilometers an hour, or for our imperial friends, between 15 and 23 miles an hour. This means it was definitely able to run down most herbivores in the Cretaceous. However, it's also been speculated that the T-Rex filled the role of a prehistoric vulture, eating carcasses of already dead organisms when they come across them. So now that we've had our crash course on the king of the Cretaceous, we can finally get to the Anjanath. How does it compare? Well, first let's take a look at the physical side of things. The Anjanath can be found roaming the ancient forest, which is pretty accurate as far as terrain is concerned. The largest Anjanath to date was found in an event called The Proving and measures in around 20.08 meters from head to tail. That's twice the length of Sue, you know, the T-Rex from before. To give you an idea of how long that is, Sue is 5 feet short of a full-size school bus. The Anjanath is a school bus and a half. Just stop and think for a second how big that would be in real life. That's freaking huge.
It's a stature that's been passed down from the Anjanath family for generations!
When compared with what paleontologists believe the Tyrannosaurus Rex looked like anatomically, it actually checks out pretty damn well. There are some common motions in both of these, like how the feet curl up between each step, or the inward direction of the arms. But there were a few specific things that impressed me. When the Anjanath walks, it has most sway at the waist, same as a T-Rex model here. This is important on a biomechanical level, as the waist essentially acts as the fulcrum in which the tail and the head counterbalance one another. For every time the massive head moves left, the tail will sway right. Head goes right, tail goes left. This center of gravity is integral to making the T-Rex's body functional. Remember, we already established that the T-Rex was insanely off balance to begin with. The Anjanath also maintains that signature S-curve in the neck that theropods are known to have, but it's extended a bit more than your average T-Rex. Because of this extinction, the Anjanath has a bit more of a slouch. I imagine length was added to make room for the flame gland that we can see dangling at its throat, something that I'll be explaining in a different episode. That being said, let's move on to our next observation, the gape angle of the Anjanath small. Taking a screenshot and using a protractor, we find that at its widest, the gape angle is about 57 degrees. In the iconic scene from Jurassic Park where the T-Rex comes back and saves the humans from the Deinonychuses, that's right, that's twice the writer and Spielberg sacrificed scientific accuracy for dramatic effect. And now I look like the bad guy for pointing it out. Thanks again, Spielberg! You had the chance to fix all this, but you chose, well, an insane amount of box office success. In that scene, the T-Rex is shown with its mouth fully open, giving it an angle of 68 degrees, which actually isn't too far from what scientists figure, 63.5 degrees. Still though, neither one of them is exact. Something else I wanted to check on was eyesight. The Anjanath relies primarily on its sense of smell for hunting, as indicated by its behavior when following it. Unless you're right in front of it, it kinda doesn't see you. Combine that with the fact that it sniffs around when it gets suspicious of something, and you can kinda see where I'm coming from. Oddly enough, the T-Rex most likely did not have this problem. In fact, the T-Rex had great vision. Why would anyone ever think other— Spielberg? See, T-Rex had a binocular range of about 55 degrees, allowing it to see up to 6 kilometers away. It also had a great sense of smell. Comparing its olfactory cavity to the brain cavity, they probably had the smelling capacity of a vulture, meaning it would be able to smell a dead carcass from a few kilometers away. Pretty impressive. And we're almost done. Recall that before, T-Rexes were considered opportunistic hunters, meaning they could have hunted together, albeit in a strange way, and they could have also filled the role of scavengers. The Anjanath has always seemed alone, so we're going to assume that they're solitary hunters. Which reminds me, after following one for a while, I had the pleasure of watching it hunt, and rather than kind of stomping in and doing what you think a brute like the Anjanath would, it actually stalks its prey the way a feline would. Head drops really low, backside in the air, waits for the right opportunity, flares everything out with a horrifying roar to stun its target, and goes after it. Man, I love the detail in this kind of stuff. So while the Anjanath looks like a turkey vulture, it really doesn't have the feeding habits of one. That being said, you can still find the Anjanath taking in the sun the way that a bird would. Or cat. I think the Anjanath's a big cat. All in all, the Anjanath and T-Rex really do have a lot in common. Even if it's not a direct match like the scavenger part, its turkey vulture design was most likely inspired by that aspect of the T-Rex, or at least its distant relatives. This is another great example of hard work and dedication paying off. It's the little things, like what we discussed today, that make games really shine. The tiny details that make you stop and participate in the world you're in. Monster Hunter World definitely has its fair share of action, but if you stop and look around, you'll be amazed at what you notice. As always, I apologize for this taking so long, but I've been doing a lot of work with game theory, so if you haven't been checking them out, go, please do. If you'd like to see more from me, please share my episodes with your friends. The more you share, the more likely I'll be able to make a career out of this. And of course, if you made it this far, consider subscribing so you know when I finally do upload something. Well, that's it for today. Till next time.